Hey, it's Mitch with Englewood Camera, and we're here at Rocky Mountain National Park, probably one of my favorite places ever. It's very special to me. And that's one of the best things about having a camera store in Colorado, is we get to come shoot in the Rocky Mountains like this. It is awesome to do this, especially with Sony's new A7R IV. Sorry about the wind, we're way up in the mountains, but this is gonna be awesome. I can't wait to show you what a powerhouse this camera is, the improvements Sony's made to this body, and we've got some beautiful scenery to shoot it in. It's gonna be great. So the A7R IV, I was not expecting this camera to come out when it did, but I'm happy it's here because the improvements that have come with this camera and what this says about the newer cameras that are going to come from Sony is really encouraging. I love all the body improvements to this. And yeah, this has some technical improvements. The autofocus is better. It's 61 megapixels. We all know it's 61 megapixels. I'm sure you've watched a million videos by now. But that's not quite what I want to talk about today. I really want to talk about how this feels like a complete camera from Sony, and I don't feel worried about it anymore. Now I just feel like there's no major compromises with this system. That's kind of the main things I want to go over today. And then we can pixel peep the hell out of this landscape with 61 megapixels, because we're totally going to do that. So I brought with me Sony's 70-200 f2.8 G Master, which I think is the perfect combination with this A7R IV. Really show off the resolution that this camera's packing under the hood. It's really going to let me show off a lot of the intricate details of the landscape as opposed to getting the whole thing with a wide angle. And the viewfinder is making it even nicer to shoot with. So they've upgraded the viewfinder on this camera. It's almost double the resolution of the previous models now. And it's nice to shoot with. It's finally right up there with the S1R and the S1 and the Nikon Z7 and the EOS R. I'm glad they caught up with that, because now this feels awesome to shoot with. It's sharp, it's clear, the colors are nice, and it's very bright. I love shooting with this. EVFs feel like they can't get any better right now. But I know they will, but right now they're feeling pretty good. So it's nice to have that. I'm trying to take a picture of Hayden's Spire, which is gorgeous, but the light is really bad now. The sun's gone right over our heads, so all our pictures are gonna suck now. That gives me a great time to talk to you guys about the smaller features of the camera that aren't front page news, but they're still great improvements for people with Sony cameras. We've been waiting a long time for the colored autofocus point, which we finally have. Now when I'm looking at that gray mountain, I don't just have a gray autofocus point. I can switch it to the color red, which is great, and that's awesome. That's a small thing, but it's nice to see. Helps us out a lot out here. Makes the camera easier to shoot with. Okay, so right now, the two best autofocusing cameras from Sony are the A6400 and the A9, and I guess the A6600 now. But this now utilizes the real-time autofocus tracking, which so far only those three cameras have had. So we're gonna see exactly how good that is in comparison to an A9, which we can test it side by side with. I'm just gonna sprint at this camera with the aperture wide open, and Alan's just gonna shoot me while I come flying towards the camera. We'll see how well it tracks me. In the mountains, the weather can turn on you really quick. Right now, it looks like we're about to get nailed by this big rainstorm. I'm not worried about it though. That's a big deal. This Sony is giving me the confidence now that I feel like I can go out in the rain. And I kind of want to stress this one. Now, I'm not going to do that to this one. If it starts raining, or throwing it in the bag and we're getting out of here, because this is not my camera. But if it were, I wouldn't be worried. There are some really evident improvements on weather sealing on this body, mainly the memory card door. Very thick rubber here, and you can feel it when you close the door. It really feels tight when it closes down. Same with the battery door. There's actual rubber gaskets down here now that you can see and actually observe and go, well, water's not getting in there. I know there's been issues with the past with this bottom plate. I think those have been solved. Same thing with these accessory doors on the side. They're rubber all the way around, so they form their own gasket, just like every other camera does with accessory doors. They've got rubber around them. And then all these larger buttons offer more space for actual gaskets and seals inside. I feel much more comfortable taking this camera out in adverse conditions, and that is such a relief. That is a huge relief. I've never actually had any issues with a Sony out in weather or getting it wet or getting it dirty, but it's since now it always felt like you would. You always felt like this thing was just going to disintegrate in your hands. This just feels leagues better, and I'm so happy they did this. Thank you, Sony, for improving the weather sealing on the body. It feels good now. Okay, so we did get caught in the rain. Yeah, we're gonna wait until it dries out a little bit and then we'll head out and try some more shots. There's so much I want to try with this camera. It's really been fun to shoot. All day today I've been carrying this big 70-200 on it, which I hated this lens before this camera because this grip makes it way more comfortable. So definitely with the bigger lenses, the bigger pro lenses, this bigger grip helps. It's growing on me. I'm starting to want this camera. One thing about Rocky Mountain National Park is usually you run into a lot of wildlife, which is pretty awesome. And today we got lucky and we see an entire herd of elk down here in the meadows. I've got a 200mm on, and on full frame that's not going to be long enough really to fill the frame with any of these animals. But it's a good time to flex these 61 megapixels and see how close they can get us with cropping. You might be worried about having 61 megapixels and not having a tripod, but let's remember that this has really good in-body stabilization that works with the lens. And I'm pretty confident that I can get a sharp shot handheld with this. We do have plenty of light, but still, this is something I'd rather have a monopod or a tripod for. But with this camera, I feel like I can pull it off. Getting ready to get behind the camera so Alan can track me with eye autofocus, which is now improved on this camera. And we have real-time tracking eye autofocus, as well as animal real-time tracking eye autofocus. So let's see what this does with an 85 1.8, real shallow depth of field, see how well it tracks my eye. Beautiful up here right now. We're losing light fast, but it's also really cold, and that really sucks. You know what else really sucks is Sony didn't really improve on this LCD screen on the back of the A7R4. That was something I was really hoping they were going to improve, because cameras like the EOS RP and the EOS R and the Nikon Z, they all really nailed it with their LCD screens. I love looking at those, and I was really hoping this was going to come in clutch and improve on it, but at least we got a really beautiful EVF, and I can rely on that for these kinds of scenes. Oh well, still pretty. All right, so we're off that freezing cold mountain peak and we're back in our little studio here, and I kind of just want to talk about some of the things I did not like about the A7R4. Main one, biggest problem, we came back home with 120 megabit file sizes for uncompressed RAW. And although that's really awesome, it's hard to work with that. So I hope in a future firmware update from Sony that we get maybe a smaller file size option, maybe 25 megabits would be great. So I hope to see that in the future. And there's still some lag in the camera that I don't like. The shutter button tends to lag behind if you're really cranking off a lot of shots in a row. And the menu still lags behind when you're changing settings really quickly. So I hope to see that maybe ramped up a little bit in some future models, or maybe a firmware update as well. And the rubber on the grip, although the grip is improved, the rubber still feels kind of slick, and it just isn't as cushy or grippy as I'd like it to be. So I hope that gets improved as well in some future models. But enough about that. I kind of want to look at these massive files on the iPad here. So let's get in here and see what this camera can really do. We're in Lightroom Mobile on the iPad, which is actually a really powerful app for reviewing and editing photos. And holy cow, look at the resolution on this camera. I can see literally everything going on down here. We're like hundreds of yards away from this, way up on a mountain, and it's only 200 millimeters, but I can really zoom in I can see exactly that that is a two-door Jeep Wrangler, and I can see over here that that's a Chevy Silverado, but look how zoomed in that is, holy cow. There's so much resolution on this camera, it's crazy. The detail you get here, it's obviously impressive. And moving on, look at this little chipmunk here. I wasn't that close to this guy, but look how far in I can crop on his face. I can see individual little whiskers. That is intense. I mean, this is a usable shot right here. If I crop this image to this, you would not know it was cropped, but really there's way more to that photo, which is really awesome. I mean, that is something we've not been able to do so easily before. And these are all handheld as well, and it's crazy sharp what we're getting. Here's Alan behind the camera. Again, handheld. I didn't even try taking this picture, but the autofocus just nails his eye right away. This is wide open at f2.8, and look at the detail that you get with this camera. It's insane. I can see every little speck of dust on Alan's glasses. Hell, I can probably figure out his blood type with that camera. Here's a great example of dynamic range. So these sliders are already adjusted, but look at that. If I bring down the highlights, and this was a really harsh scene, I can recover just about the entire sky in that shot, which I'm shooting directly into the sun. And then the shadows as well, if I bring those up, I can see tons of details, still individual trees and rocks on the other side of that mountain. I mean, that's crazy. When I first looked at that picture, I was like, oh, that picture's one for the trash, but a couple moves on the slider with the dynamic range on the A7R4, and you can really get a usable image out of this, which is really impressive. This is one I had already edited. This was probably my favorite shot from the whole day, and you can really get in here and see, once it finally loads, some really nice detail down in the foreground here, and of course still tons of detail back here, and it's crazy. This is a good shot on its own, and then you zoom out and there's more to it. I mean, it's pretty awesome. And here was the most fun one. This is handheld as well. It's only, it's an 80th of a second at f8, ISO 100, and it was getting really dark. Stabilization on this camera is great, but I can crop in on the moon and look at every single crater, and only at 200 millimeters. I'd love to see Sony's new 200 to 600 on this camera and zoomed in on the moon, similar shot, and see how much more detail we get out of that. I mean, that is intense right there, so I'm really impressed with that. All right, so that wraps up just about everything I want to say about the A7R4, and we have to thank Jeff over at Sony, and I'll link his info down below. He got us this camera pretty quickly so we could test it out up in Rocky Mountain National Park, which has been my personal favorite thing we've done on this YouTube channel and since working at the camera store. And thank you guys again for watching these videos and giving us an excuse to go do something like that. And we can't wait to make more videos like this and take cool cameras to awesome places like that. And hopefully we'll see you guys in the next one soon.